Welcome back, beloveds. In today's episode, I really want to take a slightly different approach and look at what evolutionary astrology can show us about the patterns across and the interconnections between our soul, our soul's purpose, our life lessons, our leadership, and liberation. And so I'm going to speak more high level, conceptual, a little bit theoretical about the patterns that I see across people's charts, particularly people who are doing really soul-led, purpose-driven, heart-centered work. And then I'm also going to share with you how this plays out in my own life, my own soul's purpose, why I'm here in this incarnation, the major life lessons that I came here to learn, how that shows up in my work, how it relates to the people I work with, the people that I serve, how it connects to my core challenges in leadership, the fears that come up for me again and again, the obstacles I continue to face again and again, and how all of this is related to both our personal and our collective liberation. And so, from this astrological perspective of evolutionary astrology, we are looking at the evolution of the soul's development across lifetimes. And this approach to astrology and to life really presumes that we do have a soul that reincarnates and that we live multiple lives with very clear desires and intentions for growth and evolution within each life. So it's almost like life and our lived experience is a classroom, and we are being given lessons for the purpose of our growth and development. And so the idea with this is that before we enter into a particular life or incarnation, we are spending time in the life between lives, reviewing our previous incarnation. What worked? What didn't work? What do I still need to grow into, to move beyond? What do I still need to move out of, evolve beyond, and move into, move toward? And so we are reviewing our previous lives and we're setting intentions and almost like designing the experience that we will have in the life to come. And this is aligned with what people say they are experiencing when they do a past life regression or life between life regression, when they're put into a hypnotic state again and again and again. People recount that between lives, we are basically in a classroom and we have soul guides, spirit guides that are there with us. We have our soul group. So, this core group of individuals that we continue to incarnate with again and again. And our relationships in various lifetimes will take different forms. So, maybe whoever is my father in this life was once my brother, was once my cousin, was once my best friend, was once my grandmother, right? So we're continuing to incarnate for the most part with the same souls. This is why we even have soul mates. It's not just a romantic type of love-centered relationship. These are people that we have known across the span of lifetimes. Or should I say, these are souls that we have known in various human incarnations. And so together we are growing and evolving, and we are being very intentional about what family we're born into in a lifetime, where we're born, what conditions we're born into, because all of that is serving the deeper desire of the soul to grow and evolve and develop. And it's funny because I had someone who reads the Akashic records. She and I did an exchange of services maybe 2 years ago now, and she saw in my Akashic records one of my roles in the life between lives is to be a life reviewer. So I am helping people reflect on the previous life and set intentions for the life lessons to come in their next incarnation. And it's funny because when I do birth chart readings through this evolutionary perspective, I am also doing that. I am looking at past life experiences, past life patterns that are showing up in the chart, and how they are playing out in a person's lived experience now, and what the soul is desiring to achieve overall, how those desires are being potentially impeded by the past life experiences and patterns and karmic imprints that are brought into this life, and what the soul is actually moving toward and evolving into, and what are the various things that we have to learn to let go of in order to evolve into that new direction. This is literally what I'm doing in a soul purpose astrology reading. And so I've done enough of these readings to be able to see very clear patterns that essentially our past life experiences and the patterns that we kind of developed through past life experiences, they become reinforced in this incarnation through our early childhood development, through the conditions of our cultural context, through our sociocultural norms, depending on where we're born into. Those patterns are reinforced. And so, almost in a sense, it's like we create the conditions to be caged. We create the conditions to be disconnected from our soul's essence. And the purpose of our life and our life's journey is to free ourselves from those cages, those confines, those limiting conditions, in order to return to our soul's essence, to return to our sovereignty. This is why choosing self-sovereignty is so important throughout our life experience, because it's what we came here to do. And it is the way in which we liberate ourselves from the past in order to co-create our future. And so you see, we're doing this on a personal, individual level, but that's also what we're doing collectively. We are breaking free from the patterns of the past in order to co-create a more beautiful, empowered, liberating future. And so it's interesting because what happens is the reinforcement of our past life patterns and challenges through our early childhood. This is where our insecurities and our fears, they're rooted in the past. So in the chart, we can see what these past life patterns are. We can also see what the soul desires to evolve toward, and we can see what are all the things that stand in our way. What are the karmic imprints, the past life trauma signatures that are showing up for us subconsciously in this life as well? Because these fears and these insecurities, they don't only come from this lived experience. They come from the past. So they are encoded within us on a soul level. They're also encoded within our bodies on a cellular level, because what happens is that these patterns also repeat through our ancestry, through our lineages, which is part of why we absorb them through early childhood. They're not just repeating in past lives, they're repeating in the human experience of those who came before us in our lineage. And so this is why so much of the work that I do with people is this shadow work to uncover the unconscious beliefs, unconscious behaviors, which are connected to past life experiences. And we also look at intergenerational patterns of trauma and how those experiences are carried forward through our lineage and how we are internalizing them through our ancestors as well. And so we can see that there is a core desire that underlies the challenges we face and the evolution we're here to embody. And that deeper desire of the soul, what's so interesting about that is it is connected to the planet Pluto. And Pluto is the planet of transformation. It's the planet of death and destruction for the purpose of rebirth and transformation. There is something within this approach to astrology called the Pluto paradox, the attraction repulsion paradox. So this deeper desire, this intention of the soul, it leads us to be drawn to certain things. Like we're magnetized to these particular opportunities for transformation. But as we approach them, the confrontation to our identity that is presented to us then creates a sense of repulsion. So, what we are magnetized toward, then the fears and insecurities that come up through that magnetism create a rejection of that thing. And so, we're always in this push pull throughout our lived experience to lean into the deeper desire of the soul. But as we get close to it, then we have a desire to run away from it. The ego wants to protect us from the transformation, from the change that is required, because that means we have to confront our identities. We have to redefine and reframe who we believe ourselves to be. And if you've been listening to all my podcast episodes, you know that there is something threatening about that on an ego level. So we will do whatever we can to avoid the thing we're here to do, the deeper desire of the soul. Folks who do purpose-driven work in the world, who are very soul-led in the ways that they desire to serve other people. What happens is that the core skill that we came here to learn in order to evolve, that is the skill that we teach other people through our work. So a lot of people, when they talk about purpose, I actually meant to start with this part, so I got a little carried away. So let me define this really quick for us, because most people, when they think about purpose, they are thinking about work, right? What is my contribution? And obviously that has to take the form of my career. This is what a lot of people have this kind of association with. And some years ago, when most of my work revolved around the concept of purpose, I created something called the Purpose Paradigm Framework. And at that time, I was not yet giving astrology readings, but I had already been studying for several years. And so that perspective was brought into the way that I designed this framework, which is basically that we have a core purpose, a soul purpose, a life purpose, and a right now purpose. Our core purpose that underlies everything we do is to return to the truth of who we are. That's really why we're here. That is our core purpose. Our soul's purpose is the way by which we do that. It is those lessons that our soul chose to learn through our incarnation in order to be able to liberate oneself from the confines of conditioning to return to the true essence of who we are, our soul. Love. Our life's purpose, then, is the way in which our soul purpose plays out through our collective contribution. It is how our medicine is shared with other people. And our medicine is directly tied to our core challenges and the obstacles to our evolution. And our right now purpose is, what does that look like in this moment, in this season of life? Because that will grow and change and evolve as we grow and change and evolve. The core underlying foundational aspect of what we're here to learn and to share remains the same. But the form that takes, the shape it takes, the way it happens can change as we change. And so that was the purpose paradigm framework. And so our life's purpose, our contribution to the collective, it is based in our soul's purpose, the things that we are here to navigate on a soul level through our human experience. And I also can use the chart to identify someone's quote unquote ideal client. So who are you here to serve and how? So this is where one of the interesting patterns shows up, because whatever core skill it is that I need to develop through my soul's evolution, that is the skill I teach other people in my work. And here's the thing. This is why so many of us struggle with imposter syndrome. This is why so many of us feel like hypocrites or like frauds when it comes to the work we do. We're not qualified enough. We're not credentialed enough, because that thing that we are teaching other people is the thing that is the hardest for us to master. And it is meant to be that way. But we are good at teaching it to other people because on a soul level, we innately, intuitively know how to do that thing. But because it is the reason we came to Earth, we are continually presented with challenges and obstacles that make it hard for us to do that thing for ourselves. But that's part of our soul's journey. It is to navigate that challenge, to move through that challenge. So even if we haven't mastered that skill, we are embodied in it because it is a living, breathing part of our lived experience. You do not need to have mastered something to be able to teach it to someone. You need to be embodied in it. Being embodied in it doesn't necessarily mean that you yourself are good at that thing, but it means that because it has been so challenging for you, and because you have faced the same type of situation again and again and again, you have learned a lot of tools to navigate it. You have a great deal of resources on how to do that thing because you have needed them for yourself. That's what makes you equipped to empower other people in this area, even if you yourself kind of suck at it sometimes. And it is through sharing our medicine with others that we are showing ourselves that it is possible for us too. But it's not necessarily supposed to be easy for us. And of course, this depends on kind of an individual soul contract and the intentions that they chose and the conditions that were created to meet those intentions. For some people, it will be easier than others. Some of us choose, before we're even born, to experience more hardship, to experience more suffering, because on a soul level, we know that it will serve our development. Some of us choose to repeat the past very directly for the majority of our lives because the deeper desire of that repetition is deeper integration of the lesson. Many of the things that we are navigating in this life show up as shadow, the unconscious beliefs that we have, the unconscious patterns of behavior we engage in. And we can also see the shadow in the chart. We can see where a person is unable to see the lessons they came here to learn. This is part of why it's a process of liberation, because first we have to become aware, but then we have to change. And that's the hard part. With my readings, I'm offering awareness, which for many people is very validating and affirming of their lived experience. But depending on how strong the shadows are, some people might have a really difficult time wrapping their head around some of what I'm saying. So I have seen this with one placement in particular. There's a pattern. All the people who have this one placement, which is in the most hidden part of the chart, connected to the most unconscious parts of self. It is part of their soul's intention to not be able to see a lot of what they're really here to overcome. It's more hidden for them than it is for other people. This is why the astrology reading is so useful. It's so useful because what I do in these readings is I tell you this is the deeper desire of the soul that is driving everything that's playing out in your lived experience. These are the past life patterns that are being recreated through your early childhood conditioning. These are the obstacles to your evolution, the trauma signatures that create subconscious fear. And this is where your soul is moving toward. This is what you desire to evolve toward in this lifetime. So this is what we're covering in a reading. But this is why I then also offer the option or the opportunity to do a shadow work process, a more long-term shadow work process, because that awareness is great. And these patterns, these beliefs, they are deeply, for the most part, unconscious. They are in the shadow. They are playing out in ways that we don't always recognize, and they are encoded into our cells. Our nervous systems are wired to repeat the same things. So we not only need to identify what are the beliefs, what are the patterns, but then we need to rewire our brains, redefine our self-concept, and recode the way our nervous system operates and functions and responds to life around us so that we can actually shift, we can actually create the change needed for transformation to happen. So now I want to share with you, what has this looked like for me? What is my soul's purpose? How does my soul's purpose play out in my life purpose, in my leadership? What are the things I am constantly struggling with, trying to move through and move beyond? And what is it that my soul really came here to learn? And how is all of this connected and interrelated? So, the deepest desire of my soul is to experience drastic transformation. I am really magnetized towards any opportunity for transformation, for death, for rebirth, to be the phoenix rising from the ashes. Now, what that has looked like in past life experiences that repeated in my childhood was chaos, destruction, darkness, suffering, instability. And I am here to learn to create stability for myself. I am here to choose peace over chaos. I am here to have a more grounded, rooted experience of reality. And this really hinges on a kind of relationship between rejection and receiving that's coming in from the past. And in this life, I am here to learn to choose self-trust over and over again, to not outsource my power to other people, which all of us to some extent are learning this, but it's like a very, very, very deep lesson for me to choose self-trust and to trust in my inner resources, my gifts, my talents, my skills, and how my inner resources are meant to translate into material resources, into the money and the financial stability that allows me to be more stable in my lived experience. There's so many layers to this, and I'm going to try to explain it in a very clear way. In my recent past life experiences, there have been patterns in which I was a trusted advisor to people in positions of power and privilege. I was the go-to person that they sought counsel from, that they looked to me for wisdom. And it was my wisdom and my knowing and my understanding that supported their power and their privilege. And those people used their power to control me because I only had access to resources through my relationship with them. And so their power was then used to manipulate me because I was dependent on them for my needs to be met. And they were dependent on me for their power. Now, this repeated in my childhood because my father used money to control and manipulate. My father used money to have power over me. And so what I learned through my relationship with my dad is that receiving is unsafe, which is related to the patterns I experienced in my past lives. It is unsafe to receive because even if I don't have to pay for a thing with money, I will have to pay for it in some other way. So nothing comes without a cost. And that cost usually comes at the expense of my happiness. And I very much as a child learned that money doesn't buy happiness because we had money and we were miserable. The resources, the material, financial resources that were available to me always came at the expense of my well-being, of my happiness. They were always interconnected with suffering. And so I learned it is not safe to receive from people. And I am hyper independent. As a child, I was incredibly independent. And it has been part of my life's journey to learn how to receive and to be discerning about who it is safe to receive from. And so one of the things that I'm meant to be doing in this lifetime is to trust that my wisdom, my gifts, my inner resources, my skills, my talents, that I can use those to generate my own stability, my own income, that I do not need to depend on or rely on anyone else to have my needs met because everything I need is within me. And when I trust that, what I need externally will be provided for me. Now, here's why that's really hard for me to do. Because through my past life experiences of being such an asset and a resource to people in positions of power, I learned that I needed those people, that I needed their approval, that I needed their acceptance. This was again repeated through my relationship with my dad. One of his ways of having power was to buy love. That was the way in which acceptance and like value is offered, not through being a present parent, not through being caring, not through nurturing, not through support, through money. He didn't know any other way to offer anything. But again, that money, those gifts, whatever it was, it always came with strings attached. It was never just the thing for the thing's sake. You always paid for it in another way. And that past life pattern of needing and desiring acceptance and approval, well, it played out in my relationship with my dad. And I was always trying to prove to him that I was worthy of whatever he gave me. A spoiler, I never was. It was never enough. I was never enough. Never. And one of the core challenges I am constantly navigating and trying to overcome is a deep, deep sense of rejection. And that rejection not only played out through my relationship with him, it played out in almost every condition of my lived experience. So I grew up with this strong feeling that I wasn't supposed to be alive, that I wasn't supposed to be on the earth, and that I really wasn't wanted on the earth. And some years ago, I did an experience with a friend of mine who basically put me in a state of hypnosis. And through the hypnosis, I found myself in my mother's womb. And it was like I could feel in that space. I knew from the womb is where this feeling of unwantedness came from. I had that realization, that understanding. And I also intuitively knew that it was because my mom was afraid to bring me into the world. She was afraid to give birth to me because she was in such a terrible situation. Both of my parents are from a very small village in Greece. My dad immigrated to the US as a teenager, and later in life, when he was back home visiting, he met my mom, and they eventually got married, and she immigrated with him. I was born just months after she arrived in the US, and just months after she realized she had married an abusive, addicted narcissist. So my mom was terrified. How am I going to provide safety for my child in these conditions? And through that, I absorbed this sense that I was not wanted. Now, I also recently learned from a shaman here in Mexico that a woman in my father's lineage, which I am very sure, based on many things that I know, is my grandmother, my dad's mother. That woman was doing witchcraft on me while my mother was pregnant with me. And the intention of that witchcraft was to kill me. Not only did I absorb this feeling of unwantedness through my mother's fear, but there was literally someone trying to kill me in the womb because they did not want me to be on this earth, because they did not want anything else competing for my dad's time and attention. And so this feeling of being rejected lives in the cells of my body. And then you put this immigrant girl from a Greek background smack dab in the middle of the Bible Belt, where there is nearly no diversity. And I was just a weirdo. I was very misunderstood. But not only in that context, I was also very misunderstood in Greece because I occupied two worlds. And that inhabiting of two worlds made me very different. So I was never American enough in the US, and I was never Greek enough in Greece. And I was too Greek in the US, but I was too American in Greece. And so this feeling of never belonging, never being understood, added to this feeling of rejection and this anticipation of rejection. And with that imprint of rejection comes self-doubt. It's very hard for me to believe in myself, to trust in myself, because on a deep, deep level, something in me always feels like I'm not enough of this or that, and I'm too much of this or that. So I'm never right. I'm never the right fit. And again, this was reinforced through my early childhood conditioning because I was constantly criticized no matter how I showed up in the world. I was naturally very energetic and very, just like very active, very full of life. And I was heavily criticized for that. And then that led to me often showing up as being very shy, very socially withdrawn. And then I was heavily criticized for that. And not only was I criticized for the way I showed up in the world, I was punished. No matter how I showed up in the world, I was punished. And so I grew up with this anticipation and expectation of rejection, which colored the way I saw myself. It was very hard for me to trust in myself because I felt that I was inherently bad, inherently unworthy, inherently unwanted, and deserving of rejection. Now, how this relates to the finances. So, firstly, I learned through my relationship with my dad that it's unsafe to receive. So, to have my needs met by somebody else is literally life threatening to me. So, I need to be hyper independent. But then what happens? What did I absorb through my mom? Which added to the confines of my conditioning, the limitations that I experienced. My mom, unlike my dad, came from poverty. My mom never even went to high school. She dropped out of school when she was 11 or 12 to work on the farms with her parents so that they could afford to eat. So my mom has immigrated to this country where she has no family. So she's lacking support in that sense. And she's in this abusive relationship with an addict, and she doesn't have the qualifications to get a job. And because my dad used money to control, he wouldn't let her even try. He wanted her to be dependent on him. And so my mother never left, never. She left when I was 16. Well, actually, my dad left. Anyways, that's neither here nor there, but she would not leave my dad because she did not believe that she could make it without him. She did not trust that she would be able to work, that anyone would hire her. And she was scared that she would never have enough money to take care of us if she left him. So she stayed because she didn't believe in her ability to generate income for herself to support us. And even though my mom would tell me things like, make sure you're never in this situation, make sure that you're never dependent on anyone for money, which, like, hello, I'd already learned that through my dad, like, and make sure, I am sure. But she didn't live that. For me, they were empty words because you're telling me this thing, but you choose this lack of safety. You choose instability. You choose control and manipulation because you're too afraid to choose something different. And you don't trust that something different is possible for you. So I also internalize that. So on the one hand, it's unsafe to receive. And on the other hand, it's not possible to do it on my own. And this is like the great paradox that I have navigated for the entirety of my life. And this is also why it's really interesting to understand also the soul's purpose of our family members, because they're all interrelated. And remember, your family members are likely part of your soul group. So it's like you decided together that you were going to come learn these lessons with each other. And so the lessons are also interconnected. What's so fascinating is like I can't see the specificity of my parents' charts because I don't have their birth times, but some of the bigger picture themes that don't necessarily require us to know the time, I can see. And my mom and I are both learning to create financial stability for ourselves through self-trust. Both of us are learning that lesson in this life. And both my dad and my sister are coming from past life experiences of stability and strong foundations, and money has never been an issue for either of them. Both my mom and I have struggled with money our whole lives, and my dad and my sister never have. And part of what both of them are learning together, maybe not together, maybe yes, together, because my sister manages my dad's business. Part of what they're learning is that they have to stop being so reliant on the security of their finances. And so life is putting them through this process of deep transformation that comes with challenge, because the intention is for them to disentangle their worth from what they have. Whereas my mom and I are learning to have based on our worth. So interesting, right? Now, how does this show up in my leadership, in my life's work, in my contribution to the collective? The same thing that is at the center of what I'm learning to do for myself is what I teach other people. I am learning to overcome rejection and the fear of being misunderstood in order to own my gifts, my creativity, my self-expression, the way I communicate, to own my inner resources in order to create my external desires. And this is what I teach other people. For the person that I serve in my chart, it is the revolutionary who is committed to humanitarian causes and social justice. The people who are here to shift the collective experience. That's who I'm working with. And what are the core skills needed for these people to believe in their capacity to create change? It's to allow themselves to be misunderstood and to trust that their inner skills, talents, resources can create the future they envision, that they have the capacity to bring their dreams for the collective to life. But that requires them to become okay with being misunderstood and facing potential rejection. And I'm so good at teaching people how to do that because it has been the core challenge of my lifetime. So while I don't always do it very well for myself, I have the ability to teach other people how to do it for themselves. And the way by which I do it, the way by which I help people get comfortable with being misunderstood and step into their gifts is through shadow work. It's through working with the unconscious and subconscious. And it's working with fears related to creative self-expression, fears related toward emotional intimacy and vulnerability. And because I have experienced so much darkness and despair and suffering in my life, I am very comfortable being with that part of the human experience. And so it's easy for me to take people into that place. And I also have this ability to have radical hope for change and to trust in the possibility of a better future. Because as a child, I had no other choice. I had to choose life and light to survive. And my imagination and my ability to create alternate realities and different worlds was part of how I did that. And that is something I can help other people with. So I help people believe that their vision for the future is possible and believe in their capacity to create the change needed for that future to become a reality. And so through my own life lessons, I am learning how to liberate myself from the beliefs of my parents, from the patterns of my parents, from the patterns that repeated through my lineage. And then I am helping other people liberate themselves so that they can create a more liberated world. So you can see from this example from my own life how everything is connected and how my soul's purpose for evolutionary growth and development is directly related to my life's purpose, the way in which I contribute to the world. And if you're curious about how this is playing out for you, you can book an astrology reading with me. I am going to leave the link in the show notes. Or if you want to move beyond the awareness into the integration and the transformation, you might be interested in my 6-month mentorship, which includes the astrology, but also a lot of in-depth shadow work and some nervous system somatic work to really move through the patterns, not just become aware of them and how they all play together. So, yeah, I love this stuff. We really do come here to learn liberation. And through our liberation, we are liberating each other because we are breaking cycles that from our personal experiences become replicated and reflected in our collective experience. And so we are learning to disentangle ourselves from the ways in which oppressive systems and structures have infiltrated the way our day-to-day lives look. But we are also learning to liberate ourselves from the ways in which we oppress ourselves, from which we suppress our true nature, our connection to spirit and to soul. And it is through reconnecting with soul and spirit that we create the conditions for a different kind of collective experience, one in which acceptance and inclusion and safety and belonging and freedom and liberation are the norm. But the only way in which we can break collective cycles is by breaking the cycles in our own lives. And that's literally what we come here to do. So if you want to break the cycles in your life, get in touch because I would really love to support you through that process. It is my life's work, my life's purpose to help you do that. And through that process, I am learning how possible it is for me to do that for myself as well. All right, so until next time, I'll see you all next week. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here.